Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back once more to the Horus Heresy, where we are now on part 4 of the Angel Exterminatus, and things are starting to heat up quite rapidly. Fulgrim has begun to, sweat light, apparently, which I do indeed believe is rather unusual by most regularly agreed upon metrics, yes. Perturabo finds it interesting, and he describes Fulgrim as if he is straining against his armor, as if he is cocooned in a way, I suppose, within it, as if it is some kind of creature trying to break free. Foreshadowing 101, I suppose. There is indeed something to trying to break free from Fulgrim's form. We also, and here's another little interesting thing, we also get to hear a lot about how Perturabo himself is feeling. He is feeling weak, sluggish, exhausted. There is several fairly subtle mentions, shall we say, of Perturabo feeling exhausted, feeling drained. And he always excuses it, of course, the trip into the Eye of Terror, dealing with his brother, all of this nonsense has exhausted him. It has drained him, to the point when even just pulling his hammer from its shoulder scabbard makes him feel somehow lessened. And there's also a mention of that wonderful brooch that Fulgrim gave him as a gift, changing color. Oh my! You don't say. The brooch you have hanging around your neck is changing color, is it? Oh, well, that's that's very interesting, Perturabo. It's very interesting indeed. You know, I honestly didn't catch this the first time around. I caught the brooch changing color, and I caught him mentioning it specifically because it was kind of obvious. And there's one point also where he pulls it closer around his shoulders and mentions how it's oh so very warm and how he really appreciates this gift from Fulgrim. Like, you're a Primarch. How the hell are you feeling the cold? But I didn't quite catch the wider implications. I did catch, however, how it kept mentioning the brooch, because it's like, the gift from Fulgrim, the beautiful brooch, which he also mentions was inhumanly beautiful, polished smoother than even he might manage. Right. So we're looking at an artifact here, crafted to a higher degree of skill and care than what a Primarch could do. Yes, suspicious now. Very suspicious now, but we're not going to see the culmination of that for quite a time yet. So, let us move on. Perturabo understands that the sepulchre is defended, but not necessarily in the usual meaning of the word. Instead, it appears to be a labyrinth. And more specifically, a type of labyrinth that Perturabo is actually quite familiar with. His beloved Firenze polymath had apparently created something very similar. And then, of course, Perturabo also created his own variant upon this labyrinthine structure in his Cave of Iron, his Cavia Ferrum. In other words, Perturabo is quite experienced with dealing with this particular form of defense. He even at one point states that he is probably the only one in the entire galaxy that could find the way through such an elaborate and esoterical form of defense. Now, as soon as that thought strikes him, however, he puts two and two together and goes, hold on. If I'm the only one who can find the way through this labyrinthine hellhole, how the fuck has Carucci Vora seen the Angel Exterminatus? Indeed. Good thought. And so he asks Carucci Vora to come up and join him at an intersection, where there are only two possible paths. One, Perturabo states, will lead forward to their objective. The other will lead to a lifetime of wandering and madness. Pretty good reason to choose the correct path forward, it sounds like. And then he orders Carucci Vora to tell him which path is the correct path, whilst very gently, of course, placing his ginormous hands on Vora's shoulders. And when Vora points towards one path, Perturabo simply says wrong and snaps his neck. Perturabo is quite confident that he knows the way. Otherwise, that might have been a bad idea. But he seemed pretty certain of himself so far. So I figure he's probably got a fairly good idea of where he's supposed to be going, and indeed he does. The other there's a little bit of a strange thing here. So Carucci Vora, the guide of the Emperor's Children, has his little neku snapped by Perturabo, who thinks he's a liar, and again, to be fair, he probably is quite correct in that assumption. Meanwhile, outside of the Sepulchre, the Loyalists are still trying to find a way in. The Iron Warriors, of course, having strong-pointed the one proper entrance, and so now they need to find some alternative mean of getting inside of the Sepulchre and stopping the traitors. They turn to their own Eldar guide, who tells them that, yes, there is actually a different way in, and either it is not defended in the same way, or it's a far simpler way in. It's a little bit difficult to tell, really, because they arrive a little bit after the traitors, so I'm assuming this was a slower route, but we don't get to hear anything about the trials and tribulations of their route, suggesting to me that it must have been far more straightforward. Then again, that is a little bit of guesswork, absolutely, but it does appear as if the Loyalists have a much better way. Now, it's also mentioned that the two Eldar, this is a bit later on, were just identical. Not even just like brothers, but like properly identical. Again, so if the one didn't know the way, how the hell did the other know the way? Or perhaps they simply chose to not reveal the same paths for reasons? Who knows, really? It's a little bit odd. We also get a little bit of a pair of side quests here, but side storylines. One, we get to have another look at Felix, the Imperial Fist, and how he's doing. Not very well is by and large the answer there. He, of course, is dealing with having been turned into a biological weapon by Fabius Bile. The remainder of the Terrators, the biological weapons that he created, with the exception of the two Imperial Fists, all of the Terrators have gone completely insane and are now nothing more than beasts. And to be fair, the Imperial Fists aren't much better off. To put it like this, Felix has been busying himself peeling pieces of flesh off his arm to the point where we get to rejoin him. His arm is just nothing more than a collection of torn slivers and regenerating muscle tissue. Yeah. I don't think he's quite all there, if I may be entirely honest. Then again, he is of course also dealing with the guilt of having killed the Iron Hand, of having killed a loyalist, and he now views himself as no better than the traitors. He has committed the same sin that they have, the murder of loyalist space marines, and in a way, I suppose he's correct, but I've always hated this line of moral logic, by the way. The whole you might not have been in control of your actions or your emotions or your state of mind, or hell, it might even have been an action taken by someone else, but still you're somehow responsible. I hate that. The whole idea, like, oh, well, the bad guy held a hostage, and the hostage was killed by the bad guy because you refused to, acquiesce to his demands. And the heroes are, oh my god, I'm so tortured for this. How could I have been so horrible as to act against the bad guy to try and rescue someone? Why didn't I just give in to their demands? Because surely the bad guy would have been like, oh, thank you. Well, I guess I shan't murder this wench now. I hate that entire line of reasoning. Like, no. The most of the time when we're dealing with bad guys in stories like these, they're complete psychopaths. They're the kind of people who's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to destroy the world. I'm just going to annihilate the universe or some such nonsense. They're not going to go like, oh, well, you listen to me. How lovely. We can be friends now. No, it's bullshit. It is absolute bullshit, in my opinion. Anywho, Felix does not agree, and he is beating himself up over the fate of the Iron Hands that he had to kill in de facto, in a way, self-defense, I suppose. And that's why he's peeling stuff off his arm. He is taken off to have his little conversation with Fabius as he cuts him open, as he is, of course, quite wont to do. And he informs him that apparently out of all of the victims of his experiments, only the fists are apparently able to retain their higher sensibilities. Only the fists are able to keep sane, relatively speaking, I do suppose, which is interesting. He is theorizing that it might have to do something to do with the purity of the gene seed, or perhaps that they were simply programmed to be this way, the stubbornness bred into them from the very beginning. I probably think that is the more likely explanation, since we already know that legions have been genetically designed to act in a certain way or to value certain traits in their biological construction. With how the word bearers, for example, have seemingly been manufactured from birth, essentially, to be ludicrously loyal to their Primarch, to the point of, they know they're going to get destroyed for what they're doing. They understand that this will lead to their own destruction, and yet they still go on ahead with it. That's quite a lot. That is quite something. And it would be far from impossible to assume that the Sons of Dawn have been bred in somewhat the same way, to essentially be mind-programmed to be, well, stoic little shits, I suppose. Far from impossible. And then we get to Toromino, the master of the Storbezarks, the great big gunneroos of the Iron Warriors. He, it turns out, is a little bit of a noble supremacist. He believes that only the nobles should have positions of power within the Legion, and only the nobles should be granted the opportunity to better themselves within the Legion as well. And he is mighty peeved indeed by the elevation of Kroger, someone with no noble blood. He's a filthy mudblood. There you get filthy mudbloods getting positions of power within the Legion. This is clearly the thin edge of the wedge, and it needs to be stopped, and Toromino finds himself in a rather excellent position to do so. He is, of course, commander of the Grand Artillery Batteries of the Iron Warriors. He has detailed targeting coordinates for the entire engagement zone. If he was to accidentally drop a shell too far or one too short, well, the benefits could be quite considerable. And would anybody blame him? No. I mean, this is... Yes, sure. The Iron Warriors are pretty goddamn good at the whole artillery stuff. Absolutely. But this is in the middle of the field of war, Transmissions become garbled. Errors are made. Even Space Marines could make the occasional mistake. That's just how it is. Maybe he misinterprets a radio call. Maybe the constant interference in the battlefield gets the coordinates just a little bit wrong, and oops, a shell lands directly on top of Kroger's position. He also he doesn't like it, but he's gonna have to bomb a couple of the other warsmiths as well. I mean, they're decent enough people, but they're apparently all in favor of the Mudbloods poisoning the Legion. Well, you know, some sacrifices are simply just going to have to be made, unfortunate as that may be. This, of course, also leads us to question, how frequent of a phenomenon is this? From what we know of the Iron Warriors, they are apparently quite the fractious legion, with a lot of differing groups and organizations vying for power, and also even just the individual warsmiths of commanders. How often does this happen? Could this be the reason why the Legion feels so overlooked? Like they feel like they're the mud grubbers. They feel like, because a lot of the complaints as well, I really dislike. Where it's like, oh, we were always forced to, you know, do the heavy casualty shit. We always had to push into the worst battlefields. Did you? Were you always forced to do that? By whom? Again, the Space Marine Legions have a huge amount of, well, just individual power as to their deployment, as to their tactics, as to their strategies, who they want to collaborate with, how they want to employ their units. They are entrusted with system-wide compliance actions. Yeah, sure, again, I'm sure the Iron Warriors would have signed more than their fair share of the nastier compliances, absolutely, but if they kept doing this, eventually you kind of have to start asking the question, why didn't you choose to do something else? And perhaps this is the answer. Perhaps various members of the Legions figured that, you know what? There's benefit in this. There is benefit in me ensuring that my rivals bleed for every advancement, that they never really get to fight a decisive war. It is to my benefit to ensure that for as long as possible, my compatriots, who I am all in direct competition with, don't really achieve the heights of perfection. You know, they can never win an outright victory. They can't just sweep the field because, well, then I'm gonna have to sweep the field the next time around. What if I don't manage to do that? No, it's probably a lot safer to simply make sure that nobody gets quite such a devastating one-sided victory. It is an interesting line of thought, isn't it? Meanwhile, down on the planet below, the Emperor's children are getting bored. Very, very, very bored. And they're also starting to get in touch with the planet that they're on a bit more. One of them realizes that if he cuts his palm and lets the blood well up and onto the soil, then seemingly the very planet itself rebels against the touch of his tainted blood. Something which he immediately recognizes and, of course, finds absolutely fantastic. In fact, it is worded specifically say that he realizes that his blood is polluted with something fantastic. And so, of course, realizing that, well, I could cut my fingers, but I wouldn't really achieve that much now, would it? A little bit of blood here, a little bit of blood there. It's something, but no. Go big or go home. And so he pulls out his chainsword and goes hacking into his own legionnaires. Right, well, I mean, the Emperor children have gone proper crazy for a long while at this point, so I suppose we shan't be too surprised by the fact that they are going to just cold-bloodedly murder one another for no other reason than because they feel the planet might want it. Jesus. Oh well. And he's right. the planet doesn't like that. In fact, the planet doesn't like that nonsense one tiny little bit. The planet, in fact, begins to react to it, and finally, the Eldar world reacts and begins breathing life into all of its immortal guardians. Yes, all the Wraith constructs are about to come to violent life. There's also, by the way, it's a quick little side mention as well. I talked a bit about the whole, why doesn't Perturabo recognize the ground of the planet and stuff? Yeah, no, I knew I'd seen this somewhere, and it was in this very bloody book. Because Perturabo later on says that, oh yeah, no, I know, you craft your cities from some kind of organic polymer, he states. When Carucci Vori, that's probably the label of some rather disgusting porn somewhere, mentions that he can't quite explain like what the walls are, what the labyrinth are, and so on. I bloody knew I'd seen that somewhere, yeah. Yeah, little bastard. Surely then Perturabo must be recognizing this stuff. I mean, come on. He even mentions that he has destroyed a bunch of similar structures. Yeah, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I'm pretty sure Perturabo knows what he's walking into here. It seems kind of stupid for him not to. But regardless of the truth of whether or not he knows what Wraith Stone is, and if he's recognized it, or if he simply just overlooked it through accident, or potentially something other than that. I mean, at this point, I'm not entirely sure that Perturabo is quite honest with himself, shall we say. We'll get into that in a second, but eventually the Iron Warriors and the Emperor's children reach the chamber at the heart of Aedris, the name of this long-dead Eldar world, this mausoleum. And there, they are finally confronted with active resistance. After the Emperor's children on the surface went insane and started spreading their Slaneshi blood all over the place, and also, apparently, realizing the name of the deity that they now de facto serve, yes, indeed, Slanesh, the Eldar constructs are beginning to lash out. They are beginning to actively resist these most foul invaders. Fortunately for Torremino and his store Bezasks, however, they don't seem particularly interested in the circumventions or the landing fields, instead heading straight over to the Sepulchre, presumably feeling some direct threat from the Emperor's children and Iron Warriors plunging its heady depths. Fulgrim, however, has other plans. Whilst many of his sons, Perturabo and the Iron Warriors, are busy fighting the Eldar apparitions, Fulgrim disappears. Poof! Gone, all of a sudden. There wasn't a whole lot of places he could possibly have gone to, so Perturabo assumes that he must have jumped into a hole in the floor, a central chasmish chamber which Perturabo presumes might even have something to do with how Aedris is still here, despite being in the center of the Eye of Terror, and surely should have been dragged into that very self-same eye many, many millennia ago. He therefore orders his sons to continue resisting the Eldar automatons whilst he goes off in chase of Fulgrim. I'm assuming he still thinks that there's a cache of weapons located here. A cache of weapons that he needs to prevent Fulgrim of getting a hold of. He still hasn't quite caught on to the full implications, but he is about to. He is very much so about to. As he ventures through it as well, the souls of the Eldar dead reach out to him. And at first he thinks that they're just, whinging at him, but no, in reality, they have an actual lesson that they are trying to impart on Perturabo. They are not just complaining at him, they are telling him about their sufferings, about their paths to damnation, how they ended up in, well, this this less than entirely enviable circumstance. It is a warning of she who thirsts, and a warning of chaos in general. A warning, unfortunately, that Perturabo will not really be living up to all that much. Granted, the Iron Warriors never quite fell to chaos like many of the others, or indeed pretty much all of the others did, but neither did they ever truly manage to resist the lure either. They're not slaves to chaos, I'd probably say, like many of the others, but they are certainly not independent entities either. They're too closely bound to the powers of chaos at this point. They rely on them too much for their power and guidance to truly be considered independent entities right now. But that is, of course, not an immediately important question. There's one very interesting part here. So, whilst Perturabo is delving these depths and is, thinking about all of this, he flashes back to the cliff that he was climbing as a child and where his proper memories started. And he wonders if perhaps it would have been better for him if he had simply just let go right then and there. If he had allowed himself to plunge down into the depths and have his brain smashed out on the rocks below, instead of living through an existence of a cold existence bereft of love or friendly words, is how he puts it. Which I do find that rather interesting, because that doesn't seem to really be entirely congruent with the way Perturabo actually grew up. Now, don't get me wrong, Perturabo's foster father, Damocles, was... He was certainly no bright shining light, a beacon of hospitality and friendliness, absolutely not, but he made several attempts and overtures to Perturabo. He tried to get to know his adoptive son, and Perturabo even, some of his brothers too, tried. He had not a close relationship, but he certainly was on, speaking footing with, at the very least, his sister, Cassio, something like that. He also had a great rivalry with one of his other brothers, though, well, judging by the Emperor's architect, I don't know if rivalry is the correct term, as once Perturabo actually lost to him in a bout, Perturabo just went sulky shithead and destroyed his brother's contribution to the contest and raged about it. Certainly an interesting little thing, is it not? The more and more I read about Perturabo, the more and more I feel as if he is desperate to paint himself as the victim for, honestly, what appears to be mostly his own actions. Now, although, to be fair as well, rather than necessarily his own actions, I would probably blame the star Maelstrom a fair bit, because he does often mention how it had been haunting him from his very earliest memories, and perhaps his view of his early life being, bereft of love is less because of, lacking efforts on behalf of his family, and more because of the effects of the star Maelstrom twisting his perception of things. But back to the subject of the actual book. Eventually, he manages to catch up with Fulgrim, who is standing at the heart of apparently the planet itself, which is hollow. That sounds like a needlessly massive construct, but very well. Perturabo, of course, is a little bit confused. Where are the weapons? Where is the angel Exterminatus? Is this something you merely made up to entice me here, brother? And then Fulgrim turns to him and says, No, that part was not a lie. There is an angel Exterminatus. It is I, Fulgrim. I am to become the angel Exterminatus. Apparently, it is due to his somewhat intimate relationship with a certain demonic entity that lived in his skull for a while. You may remember that plot point. I almost hate being... mirror reflection fucking cracked. God, I hate that ballpoint so very, very much. But, yes, apparently, once Fulgrim chased this entity from his mind, he realized something rather disconcerting. Without the creature living in his skull, apparently he could no longer really feel the heights of excess he had once been able to do. His world became emptier. It became bereft of a lot of the sensation, the heights of feelings that he had gotten used to. Now, this is in many ways just a normal part of Slaanesh. See, this is the reason why Slaanesh is such a bad thing. I remember a little treatise on this in the Liber Chaotica, where a particular heretic was talking to a witch hunter, and he was basically saying stuff like, how can this be wrong? How can what I am doing be wrong? All my God, referring to Slaanesh, asks of me is that I take pleasure in my actions, is that I take pleasure in the food I eat, the wine I drink, pleasure in the music I listen to. How can this be wrong? All my God asks is, after all, that I enjoy my existence. Now, of course, the counter-argument to that is that the very act of worshipping Slaanesh is in and of itself something akin to a drug in many ways. As the worship continues, the very same... how do I put it? Stimuli is probably the correct word. The same stimuli gives less and less of a high. And so the worshipper, the subject of Slaanesh, is constantly chasing after that original experience, that first hit that got them hooked on this in the first place, and they can never catch up to it ever again. They will never be able to experience that height of pleasure and of sensation. Now, in the case of Fulgrim, he has decided that that is not an acceptable outcome for him. He will regain that height of ecstasy, and he doesn't really care what it costs. If it'll require him to sacrifice his brother, well... he never really liked Perturabo all that much to begin with, so that's not that much of a problem. And whilst the War Master will be a bit pissy with him, Fulgrim is convinced that once he sees what Fulgrim has become, he will understand how worthwhile this has been. But how is he now going to go through with this? I mean, Fulgrim's certainly not a bad fighter by any stretch of the imagination, but how is he going to subdue Perturabo in a straight-up fight? Well, that is the question you will learn the answer to after this torturous little break. And back again. So, how will Fulgrim defeat Perturabo in a straight-up fight? Well, the answer to that, of course, is remarkably simple and straightforward. Because, say it after me, children, fair fights are for losers. Yes, indeed. And Fulgrim is very much so aware of this. Oh yes, absolutely. And so he has organized a less than fair fight. Remember that stone, that brooch that Perturabo is wearing around his necks? His necks? Does he have multiple of them? His neck, excuse me. Yeah, the little thing that had strangely changed its color. Oh. Well, isn't that just suspicious? Well, it turns out that thing is known as a Morgata stone. And it is apparently possessed of an ability to suck the vitality out of a person. It is literally capable of absorbing that individual's strength. Yes, that is why Petarabo has been feeling so under the weather as of late, because all of his strength has literally been seeping out of him. Small wonder, then, I certainly do suppose. And even better, the Morgator Stone is also capable of giving that strength to somebody else. I'll give you 2 guesses as to who is going to be on the receiving end of that strength. Yes, indeed. Turns out that Fulgrim's a bit of a shit. It does indeed turn out that Fulgrim is a little bit of a shit, and that he has been planning this for quite some time. And this has merely been one step in the process. Helpless, Petarabo falls to his knees in front of Fulgrim, and Fulgrim can then begin the ritual to absorb not only all of Petarabo's strength, but also to begin the preparations to elevate himself to a demon prince. Oh my, Petarabo. You kept saying you knew you were going to be betrayed, and all you need to know was the timing. Well, I don't even know if that could have helped you in this case. Well played, Fulgrim, no doubt about it. That was a nice little plan he had there, I must say. Because, of course, there was absolutely no way that Petarabo would ever have refused this gift. Fulgrim undoubtedly knew that Petarabo was a little, how do we put it, starved for attention, perhaps? It feels like almost a little bit of a cruel way to put it, but it is also true, is it not? Petarabo wanted to be close to someone. He really, really did. And here is one of his brothers offering him that, offering him a gift, a token of appreciation, of love. Something that, again, Petarabo absolutely did want. Remember back to the theatre, when at first he was clearly uncomfortable at being hugged by Fulgrim, but he also mentioned that he did enjoy that as well. The display of brotherly affection was something he was quite fond of, although he couldn't keep it up for too long. He was not fond of human contact, and, well, he was given a cloak. That's a wonderful way to simulate human contact, is it not? Without actually having to have the whole contact part. Clever. But whilst Petarabo is currently being used as fuel, as Fulgrim, all hell is breaking loose everywhere else. Above on the surface, the Iron Warriors are holding off the hordes of enemy ghosts assaulting them, and they called in a covering bombardment to cover a escape from the Sepulchre. The artillery, the Storbezasks on the Toromino, was supposed to open up a retreat path by creating a box barrage through which the Iron Warriors could travel. Now, holy shit, man. That tells you something about the skill of these bastards. They can actually put down a box barrage so accurate, so effective, that they are willing to evacuate thousands of their troops down that avenue. Whew. That is some pinpoint precision bombardment right there, but, of course, we know that Toromino has other plans in mind, and he notices, well, the connection's a bit staticky. I couldn't quite hear. What was that? Bombard the ever-living fuck out of my position? Well, if you insist. And so the Iron Warrior position above ground simply just disappears. And the position beneath the Sepulchre is not a whole lot better. Fulgrim has dragged Petarabo back up from the deep, whatever the hell they were down in. I don't even know why Fulgrim went down into the well to begin with, since now he's just coming back up again. I guess he had to do some kind of ritualistic nonsense down there, because along with Fulgrim comes a geyser of soul stones. And all of the Eldar automatons, or, well, yeah, automaton guardians, also stop moving. After this, Eidolon steps up, the one who was dead, and begins stabbing Fulgrim. Just because, why not? This is apparently a part of the prophecy. He who was once dead is going to fuel Fulgrim's ascension. And he begins shoving the soul stones into Fulgrim. Now, it's described as if there's thousands, tens of thousands of these things. I'm assuming that maybe they just, sink into Fulgrim's body? Because if he's just shoving them into, wounds and openings, then there would be a logical limit at some point. But if his body is literally just absorbing them, then I suppose that would make at least a degree more sense, certainly. However, after being shoved completely full of these soul stones, there is only one last thing to do, one last final ingredient to finish the great ritual and allow Fulgrim to ascend to the rank of a demon prince. All that is left is the Morgota stone, the Devourer, the stone that had taken so much of Perturabo's own strength. That is what he needed Perturabo for. Perturabo would be the final little fuel kicker to drive Fulgrim to the final heights required for his ascension. However, Eidolon can't find the Morgota stone anywhere. It does not appear to be on Fulgrim, despite after having removed it from Perturabo, Fulgrim set it into his own breastplate. It should have been blazing with unnatural energies right in front of poor little Eidolon. And yet, it's not there. Who has it, you may ask? Well, it turns out Perturabo is quite difficult to kill. During the ascent up the soul well, I suppose, he had managed to reach out and grab a hold of the Morgoth's stone, tearing it out of Fulgrim's breastplate. How Perturabo, who couldn't even stand at this point, did this? I don't know. This is just really, really tough, I suppose. That's really the only explanation I can really come up with at that point, but he did it, and now he has it. He even feels tough enough to taunt Fulgrim a bit with it and go like, oh, looking for this, whilst holding it over the abyss, assuming that if he drops it into the soul well, it will be destroyed. Not terribly bad assumption in all due likelihood. Trying to convince him to hand it over, Fulgrim shows him a vision of Olympia as Perturabo had always wanted to see it, with Perturabo himself as a scholar, as a learned individual, a man of peace, which again, we keep seeing Perturabo go like, oh, I just want to be a good guy. And he never actually tries to do it. He even says himself, like, none of this was ever built. Like, we need a bit more of a backstory on Perturabo, an explanation as to why he never bothered. I think the reason probably is because, well, he was never really encouraged to do so. The storm, the great star Maelstrom, basically drove him away from people, is probably what I would speculate personally. But despite Fulgrim's promises, despite stating that if Perturabo would just, well, fucking roll over and die like a good cooperative little bitch, then Fulgrim will bring the entirety of Olympia back to life, better than ever. He will not only just recreate Olympia, he will make it into everything that Perturabo ever wished for it to be. Despite these promises, Perturabo says, no, fuck you very much. And, I mean, I often question why Perturabo didn't do a lot of the things he said he kind of wanted to do, but here, oh yeah, no. I don't question this one at all. Like, he even mentions it himself. He's like, oh, okay, restoring Olympia would be worth the price of my life. However, to pay that price, I'd kind of have to trust you, wouldn't I? And even Fulgrim's like, yes, that's gonna be difficult, isn't it? Yes, it's going to be. And so Perturabo again just tells him to go fuck himself in a most furious and ungentle fashion. Before shattering a pair of wine cups the two were enjoying their conversation over, and sending them flinging back to the real world, where Perturabo, weak as he may be, hurls the Morgta stone into the abyss, destroying it. Whilst this is happening, I forgot. He tried to do that. He tried to destroy it. And then a golden bird sweeps out of nowhere. Garuda, the golden Aquila animal that was apparently the spirit animal of the Iron Hands. Some piece of ancient archaeotech that had belonged to the Iron Hands Captain Branton. And apparently it likes shiny things. And it's like, oh, well, this is pretty cool. What is it? What is this thing? Well, I mean, a Primarch wants it, so I guess it'll probably make good nesting material. And so it grabs it. Of course, Lucius, being the swift little fuck that he is, immediately pulls out a bolt pistol and shoots the automaton, I suppose, excuse me, and sends it fluttering down towards the ground. He hasn't killed the thing, but apparently this was the first time the damn thing was even shot. It came through Istvan without so much as a scratch. The Iron Hands were wondering if that was due to some kind of strange archaeotech defensive field or sheer luck, and apparently it might be the archaeotech, because Lucius points out that the moment he got a weapons lock on the thing, the moment he drew a bead on it, it started jinxing and moving as if it could tell, like, oh shit, about to get shot, better move. Very interesting that. That's an interesting little birdie bird. And now, it's a bit of a race, isn't it? Who can get a hold of the stone? Lucius, of course, rushes over because, well, he knows that his Primarch wants it. He doesn't know what it is, but he knows that Fulgrim wants it, so it's probably pretty darn valuable. He then notices that the Raven Guard is nearby and engages him in a duel. A duel that Lucius loses, and the Raven Guard kills him. Now, the first time I was reading this, I was like, hold on. I'm pretty sure there's more to Lucius's story than this. But soon thereafter I was like, right. Eidolon. I forgot that. This is why I absolutely hate it when universes bring characters back. Now, if you're gonna kill somebody, have the balls to leave them fucking dead, because otherwise you completely cheapen all of it. This is a really big complaint I have with Graham McNeil with his characters. They just don't fucking die. By the way, we don't only have Honso's origin story here, of course, but Forex, too, is the person who turns into the Warsmith, the character in Storm of Iron, which, again, I mean, I don't particularly mind, because it's a little self-masturbatory, let's be honest here, but I don't particularly mind that part. It's like, okay, you've got established characters that you want to kind of add into this, and it's certainly not impossible that they would have been alive during this period, so sure, go ahead, but now we're kind of arriving at the point of like, oh, really? So he's just been alive forever, has he? I see. Does anybody die in your stories ever? I'm not too partial to that, to be entirely honest with you. Anywho, the fight continues in the cave as the Iron Hands and the Raven Guard and a Salamander too, I believe, at least they mentioned one of them, continue fighting the Iron Warriors and the Emperor's children. The combat lasts until Shadowkin manages to dispatch Lucius and then destroys the Morgatar stone, which gives Perturabo all of his strength back immediately, and he swiftly uses it to squash Fulgrim. But, again, since death has absolutely no goddamn meaning in this novel, all that does is it gives Fulgrim the final boost to ascend. How being killed is the thing that actually raises him to a demon prince, I don't know, nor am I going to try and figure it out, frankly. Fulgrim gets smashed in the chest by a hammer, and he's a demon prince now. He then, does his little thing where he's like, oh, look at me, aren't I pretty? Then he claps his hand and poof, all of the Emperor's children are teleported back on board their ships. And then the ships, too, are teleported out of the Eye of Terror. Damn, that's... I mean, I know he's a demon prince, but holy shit. Though, then again, on the other hand, we are deep within the Eye of Terror here, so, the usual laws of reality don't necessarily apply. With this done, the Iron Hands disengage themselves from the Iron Warriors, and the two parties stare one another down. Perturabo considers destroying them, but... well, at this point, he feels like he's probably on the wrong side of the war anyways, and the Iron Hands are a hell of a lot more honorable than his erstwhile allies. He resolves himself, once again, to only ever trust one being, only one person in the entire galaxy who remains honorable and worthy of Perturabo's loyalty. Horus! I almost feel bad for Perturabo. I almost do. Like, oh, this guy won't mistreat me. Yeah, no, I'm sure he won't. He'll be real nice to you, Perturabo. Don't worry about it. After which, the Iron Hands are allowed to return to orbit. The Iron Warriors follows them as well. There are some survivors of Toromino's little backstabbery, so yeah. Status quo remains much the same. Very few of them, if any of them, died. Kroger had a little bit of a flirtation with Khorne, but he managed to get over that as well. Oh no, Harker, the ex-warsmith of the 23rd, I guess he's dead, killed by Kroger in a fit of insanity. He imagined himself as a World War I German soldier at one point, which is lovely, I suppose. But now, without the world artificially keeping gravity in check, the Iron Warriors fleet is being pulled towards a black hole. And Perturabo says, fuck it. Fulgrim said we'll meet again, so straight ahead into the black hole. I mean, they do explain that they don't really have a choice. The gravity pull is so strong that they'll be pulled in sooner rather than later, blah, blah, blah. Eventually anyway, so, may as well, I do suppose, indeed. We then get a final mention also. The two Imperial Festerators have somehow managed to break out of their, prison cells, I suppose, and are engaged in a fight with Fabius. He manages to disengage himself with the help of Lucius, who was brought aboard the ship by Fulgrim and handed over to Fabius. They then manage to lock the Terrators inside of the Apothecarium, whilst only saving one gene sample, Honorable Salaka's gene sample, with the writing on the casket having been destroyed partially by fire, to the point where it now simply reads Honso, the other Graham McNeil character. Now, Lucius too, so Lucius he's just alive again. It's not even that Fabius fixes him, he just lives because, It's not even Fulgrim's doing, because when Fulgrim brings Lucius to Fabius, he's stone cold dead, and then later he kind of just wakes up. I hate it when characters can't just fucking stay dead. Now, in this case, there was no chance of him staying dead because, he's in modern 40k, though this doesn't seem to be his usual form of rebirth, so there's that, I suppose. But why did you have to kill him then? I guess it would have been unsatisfying as well for him to have a second draw against the Raven God, but... Anywho, the book then wraps up with Fulgrim and his Emperor's children, they are way out of the crusade at this point. The Iron Warriors equally so. Fulgrim's ambition has basically deprived Horus of 2 legions for God only knows how long. Horus really should have cracked the whip a bit more. See, one of Horus' probably biggest mistakes when it came to the execution of his betrayal against the Emperor was that he did not exert proper control over the traitor Primarchs, and this in turn led him to lose practically all control over them, and what should have been a blitzkrieg assault upon Terra turns into a long, slow grind, giving the Emperor and their allies all the time in the world to prepare. Anywho, until next time, I have been Arch, thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.